Am I the antagonist for not agreeing with my husband who told me I can't go to college? Let me start by saying that I am a 24-year-old female who attended college in 2019, but dropped out to take care of my mom, who was dying from cancer. After she passed away, I moved in with my now 26-year-old husband. Currently, we have a 2-year-old daughter and are living with my in-laws while we search for a house with the help of our realtor. As a stay-at-home mom, I believe I'm now capable of returning to college. I have a strong desire to pursue higher education because I don't want to be confined to staying at home forever. I absolutely loved my college experience, and I would like to have a degree and a job to rely on, not only for the sake of personal fulfillment, but also for security in case anything were to happen in our relationship. During arguments, my husband has often made remarks like, "This is my house, my car, my insert possession." These comments have motivated me even more to pursue a job and a degree so that I can gain independence. I don't want to constantly feel like something is being held over my head. I want to be more than just a mom and a wife, as I feel like I've lost all sense of self-independence. Now here's the issue. I applied for financial aid, FAFSA, and was awarded a $7,000 grant and a $9,500 loan. The tuition for 1 year at the community college I plan to attend is $9,500. I was ecstatic and immediately registered for part-time classes, even scheduling a campus tour. However, when I shared the financial aid details with my husband, he became angry and rejected the idea. He argued that we couldn't afford a $9,500 loan and claimed that it would affect our chances of buying a house, even though the loan is solely in my name and won't impact our credit for the home loan. I reassured him that I would use the entire grant toward the loan and would find a job to cover the remaining tuition costs, potentially working at nights and on weekends. Nevertheless, he insisted that I shouldn't get a job because we wouldn't have time to spend together. He even went as far as suggesting that I take my laptop for a day while watching our baby, just to see if I can accomplish anything, making it seem like he doubts my ability to handle both college and motherhood. Furthermore, why doesn't he agree to take care of our daughter during his free time in the evenings or on weekends so that I can focus on my classes? I'm upset because my husband is not allowing me to pursue my college education. It seems like he doesn't think I am capable and he lacks support. Part-time studies only entail 4 courses per semester, so his insinuations that I won't be able to manage college and taking care of our child make me question his stance on this matter. Am I wrong for feeling this way? It is understandable that you want to pursue your education and have some independence, especially considering your past experiences and concerns about the future. Furthermore, you seem to have a plan in place to cover the tuition and balance your responsibilities as a mother by using the grant and potentially working part-time. Your husband's reaction, on the other hand, appears to be unsupportive and dismissive of your aspirations. It is not fair for him to make controlling statements like "This is my house, my car, my fill in the blank," holding those things above your head to discourage you from pursuing your goals. Additionally, questioning your capabilities and not offering to help you with childcare while he is available raises further concerns about his lack of support. It would be beneficial for both of you to have a calm and open conversation about your desires, concerns, and how you can come to a compromise that works for both parties. Good communication and support are essential in a healthy relationship, and it is crucial for your husband to recognize and respect your aspirations. Am I the antagonist for not being sad enough while also not wanting a big deal made out of my pregnancy? I'm pretty confident that I know the answer, but I have been told that my general approach and emotions regarding these types of situations are abnormal due to a difficult childhood and the nature of my profession. So I am seeking an opinion on whether I am being unreasonable from strangers. I, 28-year-old female, have experienced 2 miscarriages. Only my GYN and I know about the first one because it happened shortly after I found out I was pregnant. Surprisingly, it was actually a good thing because it wasn't an opportune time career-wise, so it saved me some trouble. The second pregnancy was planned and progressed much further along, giving my husband and his family more time to become excited. They were devastated by the loss. Personally, I wasn't happy about it, but my emotions were more along the lines of, darn it, I have to start over rather than feeling like we lost a baby. Having learned not to count my chickens before they hatch, I just don't view fetuses as people, or develop an emotional attachment to them, or the concept of a baby until they are born. I found it very irritating when everyone kept offering cliched condolences and trying to console me when I wasn't particularly upset. I tried to be understanding of their grief, but eventually, I asked not to be involved in those discussions because I had moved on. My in-laws, especially my mother-in-law, were extremely upset that I wasn't sad or grieving, and they made some inappropriate remarks. Now I am pregnant again. My husband is ecstatic, but we agreed to delay informing his family until we reached certain milestones. We told them 2 weeks ago and they are overjoyed. The problem is, I am not. I'm focused on preparing, getting everything organized, and not investing much emotional energy into the situation at the moment. I understand that they want to celebrate and document everything, but I'm already getting annoyed by it. The final straw was when my mother-in-law and sisters-in-law insisted on throwing a baby shower. However, to be honest, We already have everything we need from the previous pregnancy, and it would just be a party for the sake of having one. I expressed that I was fine and didn't want to fuss like last time. My mother-in-law exploded, stating that if I was going to be so indifferent about the miscarriage, the least I could do was be happy and celebrate the positive progress this time. She claimed that I was ruining their and my husband's excitement. In response, I told them they could have the party they wanted, but I wouldn't be attending. Therefore, my in-laws believe I am a horrible person and will be a terrible parent. My husband hasn't gone that far, but he did mention that it is strange how calmly I am approaching the situation and would like me to let them have the baby shower as they are trying to be nice. Your feelings and emotional experiences are absolutely valid, and you have every right to approach your pregnancy and the losses you've experienced in a way that feels right for you. Everyone grieves and processes differently, and it's important for your husband and his family to understand and respect that. It's unfair for your mother-in-law and CILs to project their own expectations onto you and demand that you feel a certain way or engage in celebrations that might not align with how you're currently feeling. It's your pregnancy and your choice on how you want to handle it. Your husband should be more understanding and supportive of your emotions. It's important for him to communicate with his family and advocate for your needs and boundaries. It's not weird or abnormal for you to have a more detached approach after going through miscarriages in the past. At the end of the day, your emotional well-being should be prioritized. If attending a baby shower or engaging in constant celebration feels overwhelming or inauthentic to you, it's okay to set those boundaries. Your husband and his family should respect your choices and emotions. Am I the antagonist for not letting my neighbor use my dryer? In the rental I currently live in, there is a shared room in the basement where everyone has a designated space for their washer and dryer if needed. My previous neighbor from across the hall, R, didn't have a dryer while living here, but we had an agreement. She could use my dryer for free as long as she plugged it into her own outlet. In return, she would water my plants when I was on vacation. I could enjoy the tomatoes she grew in her backyard, and sometimes I would help take care of her dog. It was just small favors between neighbors. About 3 months ago, R moved out and L moved in. I had encountered her a few times in the hallway, and since she is studying veterinary medicine like I did in the past, I offered her assistance and my old things if she ever needed them. I was always friendly to her during our previous encounters. Recently, I went to the basement to do some laundry and noticed that my dryer had just finished running on my own outlet. Coincidentally, Elle came down at that moment and started taking out her clothes from my dryer without saying anything. I asked her if she knew that it was my personal dryer, not a communal one. She acknowledged knowing this, but assumed she could use it because R had mentioned it before. Frankly, I wouldn't have minded if she used my dryer, but I didn't appreciate that she didn't ask for permission first. So I politely told her that I would prefer if she didn't use my dryer since she didn't ask. Elle replied with annoyance and left, which I thought would resolve the issue. However, that was not the case. I caught her using my dryer 2 more times, with each instance plugged into my own outlet. Each time I unplugged it and asked her not to use it again. Foolishly, I let her finish drying her clothes each time as long as she plugged my dryer into her outlet. After the last incident, I assumed she finally understood that I didn't want her using my dryer. Unfortunately, this was not the end. Earlier today, I caught her using my dryer again. So I simply unplugged it and removed the cord so she couldn't plug it into her outlet. I didn't inform her about my actions. Just around 30 minutes ago, she aggressively knocked on my door and yelled at me because her clothes now smelled bad, as they were left wet in the dryer for too long. Honestly, I don't feel sorry or guilty about what I did. However, some of my friends believe that while it's acceptable to not want her using my dryer, removing the cord and leaving her clothes wet was going too far. You had an agreement with your previous neighbor to use your dryer in exchange for some favors. But that agreement ended when she moved out. Elle, the new tenant, assumed that the arrangement still applied to her without seeking your permission beforehand. You tried to communicate your preference multiple times, but she disregarded your wishes and continued to use your dryer. Removing the cord was a reasonable action to prevent her from using it again. She should have respected your boundaries and asked for permission before using your personal property. Am I the antagonist for not translating for and then yelling at my classmate? I am a 15-year-old female living in Australia. Although it is not my home country, nor the country I was born in, I can speak Japanese, Chinese, and English, which is important for the rest of the story. Before you judge, please read the whole thing, as I am unsure if my reaction was justified. I recently transferred to a new high school and initially felt alone until I met someone, whom I will refer to as Kana. Both Kana and I sat alone during lunchtime, and we quickly became close when we discovered that we both spoke Japanese. Since English is neither of our first languages, we decided to occasionally converse in Japanese while working on a project together. Even after completing the project, we continued to speak Japanese during lunchtime. However, this seemed to greatly upset another girl in our class, Lucy. Despite sitting at a separate table, Lucy walked over to us and demanded that we translate and go back to Asia if we wanted to speak anything other than English, since it bothered her. Lucy's remarks made me slightly uneasy about her intentions, but I ignored it. Furthermore, Lucy listened in on our conversation even though she was sitting at another table and then angrily confronted us. We informed her that we were not speaking about her and we were not supposed to involve her in our conversation. If Lucy had been part of the discussion, we would have spoken in English so as not to exclude her. This continued for about 2 weeks. I did not approach a teacher as my school does not address such issues, and I did not want to create a big situation. Despite Kana and I moving tables to avoid Lucy's lectures after a week, she would still come over and berate us whenever we spoke anything other than English. She would even walk closer beforehand to eavesdrop because she couldn't hear properly from her table. After the 3rd time that week of her demanding that we speak only English, I calmly asked her to stop criticizing us. I explained that Kana and I simply wanted to communicate in a language that was easier for both of us. Offended, she called us anime kids. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore, so I stood up and told her to leave us alone, using more forceful language. I also called her nosy for constantly eavesdropping. I told her to go back to her table and not to approach us in such a manner again. Lucy started crying and ran back to her friends, who comforted her. Seeing her upset, I felt intense regret for losing my temper. So, am I the asshole for reacting this way? You're not in the wrong here. Lucy was completely out of line for demanding that you and Kana stop speaking Japanese. It is not her place to dictate what language you speak, and it is unfair for her to try and control your conversations. Furthermore, you and Kana were not discussing Lucy or involving her in any way, so her anger is unjustified. You tried to handle the situation calmly and kindly when you asked Lucy to stop berating you, but she responded with offensive remarks and name-calling. At that point, it is understandable that you lost your temper and stood up for yourselves. While it is regrettable that Lucy cried, it is a consequence of her own actions and not your fault. It is important to establish boundaries and stand up against bullying or harassment. In this case, Lucy was being rude and intrusive, and you had every right to defend yourselves. Am I the antagonist for removing my daughter from her bed at 3 a.m.? My 34-year-old daughter has been having a sleep regression issue for the last approximately 6 months. Basically, she wakes up 5 times a night. Almost every single time she asks my husband and me to come and physically tuck her back in. She shares a room with 2 of her 3 siblings, which is not ideal and will be changing soon. Whenever my husband handles her wake-ups, the behavior becomes more frequent. In my opinion, this is because he goes all out in comforting her. He sings to her, cuddles her, and talks to her, instead of simply putting her back in bed and going back to sleep. She gets a lot of attention from him at night, which encourages her to wake up more. I have tried explaining this to him, but he dismisses it. As a result, I usually get up with her in order to reduce the behavior by giving minimal feedback and just putting her back in bed. My daughter came to me at almost 3 a.m. and asked me to cover her back up. I was admittedly short and irritated. I took her back to her room and told her that she is a big enough girl to cover herself with blankets. We had practiced this and discussed it before, so it wasn't like I expected her to do it herself out of the blue. However, she refused. So I told her goodnight. She began screaming and crying loudly. I told her that I would count to 3, and she could either stop screaming or we would go downstairs. By this point, her crying had woken her siblings, and I was trying to manage the situation. I counted to 3, but she kept screaming. I lifted her out of bed and led her down the stairs by the hand. At this point, my husband woke up. He told me that he could handle it. I informed him that I was taking her downstairs to talk to her and to prevent her from screaming near where everyone else was sleeping. He told me to stop, but I insisted that he was undermining me and needed to back off. He eventually stepped aside but followed me downstairs, cooing to her and bringing her water. I repeated that I can handle it and asked him to please leave us alone to talk. However, he refused. I did manage to talk to my daughter, explaining that she couldn't scream like that and that she needed to be a big girl and take care of herself by covering herself with blankets at night. My husband continued to hover over my shoulder. I then took her back to bed and she did cover herself up. We left the room. Immediately, my husband turned to me and accused me of abusing our daughter. He insisted that I couldn't convince him that what I was doing wasn't abuse. I tried to explain myself, but he ignored me and went downstairs to the couch. I attempted to talk to him again, but he kept insisting that I was abusing our daughter. I admit that I was short with her, but apart from leading her downstairs by the hand, I did not touch her. And I don't believe I was overly mean in trying to teach her to tuck herself in when she wakes up uncovered in the middle of the night. So, am I the a-hole? It seems like you have been trying to handle your daughter's sleep regression issue in a reasonable manner. It's understandable that you and your husband have different approaches, and you have made efforts to explain your perspective to him. Taking her downstairs to talk and prevent her from waking her siblings seems like a reasonable solution, given the circumstances. Your husband's behavior of undermining you and accusing you of abuse seems excessive and unfair. It's important for parents to present a united front and support each other's parenting decisions, especially in challenging situations like this. The focus should be on finding a solution for your daughter's sleep regression issue rather than placing blame on each other. It might be helpful to have a calm and open discussion with your husband to address these concerns and come up with a plan that both of you can agree on. Consider seeking professional advice if the sleep regression persists to find the best approach for your daughter's well-being. Am I the antagonist for telling my coworker that her comments were inappropriate and rejecting her offer to help? I'm currently 8 months pregnant with my first child, and my husband and I are very excited about it. I am nearing my maternity leave and recently went into the office to tie up loose ends before I go. I primarily work remotely, so despite our team growing quickly in recent months, I haven't had the chance to meet every new team member in person. This week there were many new faces, and I enjoyed talking with them. Since it's evident that I am pregnant and everyone in the team knows about my maternity leave, some of the new starters approached me to discuss it. I'm happy to talk about the baby and our preparations, but I had an uncomfortable interaction this week. A colleague named Susan joined 3 weeks ago, and I will be passing on some of my work to her during my absence. Although I've had a few virtual meetings with Susan, it was the first time she saw me face-to-face on Tuesday. She started asking a lot of questions about my pregnancy and even went into graphic detail about her own birth story. It felt a little odd, so I tried to change the subject. That's when she said, "I'm not speaking as your colleague, I'm talking as your friend. If you ever feel or notice something unusual, please feel free to reach out. This could include cramping, bleeding, or your water breaking. You can even contact me if you need someone to coach you for birth." It's important to note that Susan and I are both engineers, and she has no medical background. I was completely freaked out by her offer to help and the idea of discussing personal details about my body with someone I barely know. We had always maintained a professional relationship until now, and it was our first in-person meeting. I thanked Susan for her concern, but assured her that I have a fantastic team of doctors and a very supportive family, so I am well supported. However, Susan persisted, saying, "Sometimes it's easier to talk to someone who has been through it. So, please feel free to call me, even in the middle of the night if you don't want to wake your husband." At that point, I expressed my discomfort, explaining that this conversation was not appropriate for work, and I would appreciate keeping our discussions focused on work-related topics only. Susan seemed upset by my response and has since been avoiding me at the office and taking longer to respond to emails. I mentioned the situation to my mom and she believed I was too harsh. My mom thinks Susan was likely trying to bond with me and didn't know any other way. She suggested that I should have told Susan that discussing personal matters at work was not appropriate, but should not have rejected her offer to help. According to my mom, Susan may have been looking for a female friend at work and simply came across as strange. So am I the one at fault here? It was inappropriate for Susan to bring up personal and intimate details about your pregnancy and offer her assistance as if she were a medical professional, especially when you barely know each other. You handled the situation respectfully by expressing your discomfort and asking to keep the conversation work-related. It is understandable that Susan might have felt hurt or embarrassed after being called out, but that doesn't make you the AH. Boundaries in the workplace are important, and it is perfectly acceptable to establish them. Your mother's perspective is understandable, but it is ultimately up to you to decide what makes you comfortable in a professional setting. Thanks for watching. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist in the description.